Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's always great to be back in our virtual studio.
It is. And today is a continuation of a discussion we had, at least a continuation of the topic of a discussion we started with Deborah Jasper, which is how do you tell stories, and especially as a startup? How do you tell stories that actually yields you the lifeblood that keeps you funding and running, to pursue your dreams of a startup. And it's a hard skill. And we have a great guest today. I'll actually take the honors of introducing Lee, somebody I know for a very long time in a variety of capacities, big companies, small companies, startups. I almost went to work, Lee, right, with a startup you launched. Lee Launer, who is a former chief executive officer at Fidelity and Guarantee Life, currently on the board of Nassau Financial Group, of our insurance company. Lee, thanks for joining us.
It was good to be here. Good to see you all.
Yeah, and Lee, when we started down this path of trying to help people tell stories and pitches, you obviously were on our list of people to talk to and get insight. Can you kind of walk through how have you talked to people? Just maybe you could just give us a little bit of your history and all the different scenarios you've been in, telling a business story and asking for money.
Right. Well, there's always the asking for money part. That's part of it. No, I've been in business for a long time, and 3 companies with you, Paul. I counted them up after a while. 3 companies I've known you for 20 years. Well, 23 that you've worked with me in the same company, and told a variety of stories from MetLife going public. That goes back a long time, but that's a big company going public, to startup ventures in Bermuda and trying to attract reinsurance companies, trying to attract money. Did that for a while. And then Fidelity and Guarantee Life's IPO as a CEO when we rang the bell, Paul, as you remember.
I have a picture over here.
I'm sure you do. That involved probably the most intense telling of a story I've ever done in my life. Is that, and it was, I just love that experience. It was extremely difficult, but I learned a lot out of that experience. And recently I have been spending more time with startups, newer companies, smaller companies, the kind that are just starting to get revenue, and they're not being funded by venture capital and companies. So they're really working the friends and family office circuit, and trying to raise money, while, I might add, trying to run a business, which is the most incredible thing ever, is developing your product and at the same time spending so much time trying to raise money. And so I just know a lot of people, and they tend to come to me with decks and say, how does this pitch look? What do you think about that? Is it the message coming through? It's usually in the form of a deck. I've seen more video these days is way. And I love the fact that you folks have done a lot of the helping in this way too. You interview a lot of companies, and you often ask, what need are you attempting to satisfy, which is a great way to get them talking about their company. But it is a difficult job. It is something that does not, for whatever reason, we can all postulate what that might be. It is a difficult, Paul, you're the chief marketing officer, for goodness sake. So it's so hard. We've got you doing it. So
not very well, Lee.
But it's very hard. It's very hard for people to talk about themselves and talk about their business for some reason. So anything I can do, anything I think we can do, anything even the people on this phone can do, or the insurtech community in Hartford can do to help people get noticed, get their story out, I'm all for. And that's kind of how I got involved in hearing stories and helping people kind of tell their stories.
Yeah, 23 years, Lee. How did that happen? I don't know. That's insane. I hadn't thought of that. Yes.
No, we don't have time on this podcast to recount all the Paul Tyler stories.
And
I've
I'm
been
gonna say,
through
Lee,
with
I'll call you separately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
So Lee, maybe, and I'm just kind of thinking about, our audience. So we have a lot of startups, pure startups. I would describe them as past the need for angel funding. Some of them need angel funding, and they're kind of between, but they're too small to necessarily get a check immediately from a VC or even a strategic VC. So stories are tough, and there are a lot of companies in that space who are trying to break out. So competition is ferocious in this space right now. So if we started small, it's amazing. We've seen, and you've invested in some of these companies. What are the biggest pitfalls? I mean, what are the biggest mistakes? I've seen so many pitches and so many bad pitches, right? What are the 10 traps or you can
right. We talked about one before we went on air, which was the wrong altitude. Sometimes they start at ground level describing their company and you're missing what market are we talking about? How big is that market? Is that market growing? But I think the altitude, I always like to see a pitch where you're talking at a very high level, then down a level, then down a level. And I think another one that is weird, but who's your customer? Sometimes we get a lot of stumbling block around, and we're talking about, is it the agent? Is it the IMO? Is it the TPA? Is it the influencer? Who's it could be separate from who's paying for it. Sometimes we got all balled up in that. And so I think is it the bro? Sometimes you just have to unconfuse the listener and just stick with the main one, and just go with that. And we can introduce how the product could be helpful for other people. So let's not introduce all the potential ways this product can be used. Also, sometimes people, let's give me the whole product line, as opposed to, could we just talk about one product, your main product, your principal product, the one that that are people most interested in. That's helpful in cutting down, some of this complexity, So those are the three. I mean, you have the one stylistic thing that I like to see is, and again, these are investment. Here's right at almost the very first slide. Here's why you should invest in this company. I'll tell you later why. This is going to make sense in a minute, but I want you thinking about these are the things why you, and then that's the last slide as well. So you tell them up front, you tell them why, tell them at the end. We did that often in the IPO. I believe we did that in the IPO. It seemed to be effective. Interestingly, I mean, I always tell this story. You probably heard of all this. When doing the IPO for FGL, we would come in contact with people who, investors, some knew the market really well. They knew what an annuity was. They asked a very fine question. The others didn't know anything about an annuity. And you know what happened at the end of the day? We got just as many orders from those people who didn't know anything about an annuity going in as we did. So clearly, spend your time on those that don't necessarily know your business, right? So sometimes that's avoided, or it's assumed that the only people that we really should talk to are those that know does that make sense to you, Paul and Laura?
Yeah. And I guess, like, Lee, when you think about your comment about the people who didn't know the business versus the people the people who didn't wrote the checks. So in terms of, why did they write the check? Were you effective in communicating and explaining the business, or were you most successful in communicating and creating a belief in you and your capabilities of the team to deliver what you said you were going to do?
Well, it's different for those different audiences. Some people, you're selling below a book, and I like the team. That's all they need. Some people go, nope, e-apps are the way to go. I'm trying to create a portfolio that is in certain areas, the digitization of the front end. I want one claims company. So they've got a different motivation. They're trying to fill in kind of a portfolio look, right? So one size doesn't fit all, and it's kind of hard to figure out what's motivating that particular. But each person I found is trying to pigeonhole you into something, so that once they figured out what you are, they're relieved, because they're upset at first. They don't know what you are. Once they figure that out, they go, oh, that feels better. I know what they are. Now, hopefully that's something they want to invest in. But now I know what they are. And then they go into their confirmation bias kind of thing where, oh, that thing. So it's hard to tell, Paul, what makes that light bulb go off. All I know is you don't have a lot of time to get that light bulb on. It's minutes. It's minutes. And if you don't get it on, most people are so stressed with time, they go to a different place, and then you don't get them. So that's why this is, I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So important that you try to get it fast and get them engaged. Storytelling helps too, not just the story, but I mean, as you remember on one road trip, okay, just put down your pencils. Just think about this. I'm a 69-year-old man. I have 600,000. I'm completely frightened by the stock market. Then you go into the product. Well, now I'm thinking about that person, and do I know that person? That helps maybe engage them.
So on that theme of knowing the person, to increase the odds of someone being able to walk in the room and tell that story, what piece of advice or pieces of advice would you give to a startup who's going to walk in to make their pitch? What should they know about the person they're pitching to in advance?
Well, the more homework, the better. And particular, what companies they've invested in the past, and what's their background, obviously. Um, any kind of a tidbit on what their personality type is like. Are they going to be really aggressive? Are they going to just sit and listen forever? What's Any kind of background like that is helpful. But you can't get that all. But you can't get that all the time. But if you know somebody that knows the person that you're talking to, that helps. And so as much as and then also throw in something where it shows you've done some work on them. Just oh, you know about me? Yes, we do. Oh, that makes me engage a little bit more right now, if that's the case. So that's a good way to draw them in a little bit.
You mentioned you only have a few minutes for them to sort of connect with them to understand, you're this. Analogies, is a successful pitch like the kind of cliched movie
Absolutely.
pitch. Okay, it's Superman meets Silence of the Lambs.
I don't know. I think the analogies we're like this for that. I mean, it does help. They're looking for a way to place you. Sometimes mentioning trends, we're a play on cheap data. We're a play on digitization. We're a play on point of sales. We're a play on 24-hour service. Sometimes that helps them get their head around what you are and why you're different. Sometimes people are motivated by investing in macro we're playing the aging of America. I'm just making these up. The aging of America, whatever. Sometimes that motivates them to engage. But as I'm saying, it's all. I think one other thing too. I'm looking at a couple of notes. One thing that people don't do, and I wish they would do more of, is talk about the relationships. I mean, sometimes they get wound up in the technical nature of their product and this and that. But they don't talk about, well, we're going to be successful because I know all these people, or I have a relationship with this distribution business. It's okay to talk about soft things like relationships. I mean, sometimes And it's okay because those are hard to make and those are hard to keep. And those are a moat to other people. So that was just kind of a pet peeve. Do you know what I mean?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Those relationships we pitched very hard in one of the companies that we worked with Paul, and people bought that. I've known these people for 10 years. When I walk in the building, they happen to be in my conference room. What are they doing here? Oh, we have a relationship with them. They're always working with us. That's the last thing I wanted to say was too is it's just some of what I do is try to connect people with facts. They'll come in. I'm hearing pitches from, well, I'll just make one up. Revolutionary, different way to process claims from water damage. Just make one up. Okay, that's great. How many claims from water damage are there out there? I don't know, but there's a lot of them, Lee. Just take my word for it. Okay, that's great. But some of these firms need to be connected with facts, and who has those facts? And they don't know where to get those facts. I don't know if it's Limmer or Loma or AM Best or Oliver Wyman. I just don't know. But we start to connect those companies with places so that they have, thinking of another company we worked on, Paul, luckily we did have somebody who is the scorekeeper for the fixed index annuity business. It was great. It was there. We had that data. But how many MedSup e-apps, how many MedSup apps are being done by paper now? I don't.
Yeah.
See if you can find people in telling your story, some of those hard facts. So it's not just you representing the market. It's those facts.
Bring more people into your story, authoritative figures, even if they're not sitting at the table.
I find that there's shockingly little data behind some of these claims that the companies come in with. And not that they don't have a good feel for it, but I'm working on something now on life e-apps. How many are done by paper? How many are done by first generation e-app? How many are being done by second generation?
Oh, we could have a great conversation on that
code.
one. I'm dealing with this, Lee, every day.
Right.
We just did today. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Well, how's that conversation going?
Yeah, it's interesting. How do you, well, if you want to change behavior, change, market, you got to think about how to position it. I was on a phone call today where people were saying, well, how much business are we going to lose because we've gone paper? No, I said to him, no, don't, that's not, ask who are we keeping? Because we're doing the electronic applications. How do you frame this story differently that builds on it? I don't want to hear about the people we left behind. I don't care about them, right?
Right.
When was the last time you filed your taxes with the IRS by paper, right? People can't do it.
Well, I think though, when you're asking for money, people don't know that your investor probably doesn't know the state of that little micro market.
Right.
They just don't know it. And so if you can bring in Oliver Wyman or somebody or who can say, it's changing at roughly this rate and everybody's going to go here, it's just a matter of time. The investor could say, oh, I want to be on that wave, right? I want to be. Then, of course, they're going to ask, well, if I want to be on that wave, why should I invest in you when there's 3 other people likewise riding that wave that are in that market? And then you have to put on, okay, great, I've sold you on the market, but I haven't sold you on us. Why us? And then you've got to make that slide, and every deck's got the slide, us versus all the others. And there's the check marks, and then there's the story, and then you do that.
No, and I agree with the data. Data is powerful. Now, it's interesting. E-app, right? What is the percent? It's hard to actually find that number anywhere. You can't find it. Now, intuitively, gosh, every touch has to happen. Gosh, it's got to cost a lot. Now, It's interesting. Well, argument one is, well, modern companies don't do apps this way. Well, that's behavior. It's like feels like a style thing. Why are you forcing this on me? Now, wait a second. If we get maybe it's not even the e-app. It's like these what if we got applications in that don't require touches? Okay, for every 1%, this is back of the envelope numbers I'm trying to check, Lee, is wow, if we improved our in good order rate by like 1%, it looks like it would actually cut our cost by 3%. What? Wow, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of time. What would you do now with 3 or 4 people who you could fire them, or maybe they could start doing this, which we wanted to do.
Right. The math is there. I think when you're talking to an investor about e-apps, the thing that I try to get the company who's seeking money to say is sales aren't optional, right? You have to have them. There's not very few businesses that can survive without sales. Sorry, right. It's a requirement. It's not a nice to have. This helps sales. Oh, okay. That's where there's going to be money. People are going to make money, spend money to make sales. Sometimes you have to zoom up to that high altitude once in a while.
We want to be Shopify for the insurance industry. Plug the card in, get the sale. Don't worry about it. This is not something people should be touching, doing, redoing, right?
Right. I think that the companies that are involved in the sale piece I believe are having a little bit better time, easier time than some that are, we're going to replace the backbone digitally, or I'm going to analyze your data and how to write risk better, right? You got to have those sales, right? And so, and then you say, listen, in a time crunched world, which time has gotten more and more precious. You have to get that client in 30 minutes. It's like you've got to underwrite for a simple life product in not a huge face amount in 30 minutes, done in good order per state. If you've got suitability, it's got to check. It's got to be straight through to the manufacturer's system. That it's like a car dealer. That person cannot walk out of the car dealership without a car. They have to walk out with the product. And so, particularly if they're online, where you don't physically have somebody corralling them to hang in there, they can just go away. So that's even that little story there. It's like a car. You finally got them. If you go into a car dealer, why do car dealerships have cars on the lots anymore? I've always been marveled at this. Just bothers me. They occupy real estate. There's a bunch of specs on the cars you don't want. But why? Because they want you to buy it and walk away with it. Then they do not want you to walk away without the car that day. Right? They'll do everything they can. Okay, if you tell that kind of high level story too, to a potential investor, they might get that because they bought a car before, but that's why an agent wants it done, and they don't want a NIGO where they've got to go back and verify something, and 3 days later the agent gets back and they've changed their mind. But you know how it sells. Just sometimes, again, back to telling stories. Sometimes you may need to do that.
Okay, so you're good at this, Lee. Let me throw the curveball. Okay. Cybersecurity. We had a whole panel on cybersecurity. We've seen pitches from. In fact, we've got a real interesting one in our incubator from Australia. I'm going to send this one to you. I have this box of this code I have. Yeah. It's got the best process in the world. Nobody can hack it. It's got 10 times. How do you sell something where you can't really prove it doesn't, right? It works until it doesn't.
How do you get an investor to invest in that that company that makes that? Well, A would be fear. That would be number one. Fear that you're going to have given the amount of money you're going to spend, it's not very much compared to the PR and reputational nightmare that you could have if it happens. So it's a low frequency occurrence with terrible consequences. So I would prefer, though, you find something other than fear to sell with.
Right.
Personally, I think that morally, I don't like to go down. I am in the life insurance business, so I get the fear of dying thing. We play on that quite a bit, but I would try to find something else that that is more positive about cyber security than just the pure, fear element. It could be socially about protecting people in today's world. I can do a level of protection for people that people can't do individually.
Yeah,
I'm going to help out with that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of interest in cybersecurity. Shauna Schlossberg at Upward Labs brought, she had a whole delegation from Israel through there. And I'm in the insurance business. I kind of know math, but I felt dumb talking to these people. Well, and the story kind of went like this. I was in the army. I was in Mossad. I got all these Israeli, I got this secret sauce from Israeli intelligence, and it's here in a box. This box, don't touch it.
Right.
Don't touch it.
Right. And while the Israeli story is interesting and it's consistent with Startup Nation, which is
right,
the book about all the Israeli startups, it's got to be more of a why story. Why am I going to invest in that? What's so great? Where's the market? Is the market going like this? Is it growing? Our security solution is third generation and everybody's on generation 1. How do you prove that? Meaning everybody's going to go to where we are. If you could ever establish that, that'd be fantastic. Everybody's going to go where we are. And not only that, now that you're in love with the market, we're the best to perform in that market versus other competitors. We acknowledge there are other competitors. I mean, another thing that I know we watch our time here, but another thing that gets me when these is these over proclamations about their company where you're starting to lose credibility. Oh, we offer a world-class service. Unlikely. It's you offer a good service and just be proud of it. Or you'll have a slide that says knowledgeable and experienced management. There's always some caption as if I couldn't read the graph myself and deduce that you have an experienced management team. You don't need to tell me and reemphasize it's there. Give me some credit that I can read. So don't keep pounding away like amazing and world-class and super, just let at points, let the numbers, because if you get too salesy, it kind of loses, in my mind, a little credibility. I had to back one company off. This company, Paul, just got a little too carried away with that. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the feedback, I think, is some of the most important part about the storytelling process is it's almost as though unless the startup is receiving the feedback that they're being too salesy or too aggressive or too, you name the word, they're not gonna stop. So that's kind of why having an individual such as yourself involved in this piece of the process is so important, because they're not going to learn till they learn. And some we've even had experience with, you let them know and they're like, I'm going to do that anyway. I'm going to come in just as aggressive tomorrow as I did today. And it's just interesting to watch people choose how to tell their story, even if they've become more educated about how they could potentially improve on it.
Well, Laura, you found most people are receptive, I would imagine, they are receptive to change, right? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I would think
most. The highest percentage. Yeah, for sure.
Well, this is, as I said at the top, it's just a real service that I think you all provide in giving these voices to people. And then 2 is if there's anything you could do to help them connect the facts to build their story, and then help them with their story, help them get it tight. I watched one boot camp for a company or a healthcare startup, and they got accepted to one of these influencer kind of boot camps, a famous guy boot camp, and the famous guy gets 30 of them in a room, and they call them up individually, and the founder has to give the pitch, and they actually rate the pitch. They all sit around and rate the pitch right there, and then they rip the guy or the man or woman apart right there. It's brutal, but they get better. They get better and better and better. And that's a service that's a distinct service that this influencer provides to them. Is there anything like that you know of, that like in insurtech Hartford or somewhere where you've got kind of a review committee?
We hear of it, yes, but you're giving me an idea of how interesting would that be, Paul, to get a few of them together and have that type of an atmosphere, if you will, with a whole panel of, feedback coaches, if you will.
No, I think it'd be great. We've had, I would say, startup boot camps brought in coaches when they were running Hartford. Shauna certainly has. That said, it's right. You can never tell the story well enough, and if you're showing up for an incubator or something to accelerate, you still have work to do, either on the business or the story, one of the two. Well, let me ask you another question. So it's hard enough to tell your story yourself. Now, I think about the situations you've been in, Lee, like F&G. We had what, maybe probably 10 hands in the story. Go to MetLife. Remember those huge sessions for that IPO where you'd have like 50 people listening to the story? How do you get like 2 or 3 people to start telling a story the same way? And to share that story.
It does take a lot of people to get to construct a story. I remember when you were in the IPO room, when we had 3 investment bankers in there, sleeves completely rolled up, food, tucked in crevices, and crumpled up papers as we were going, how does this fit? How does this fit? Let's work on the logic flow. Remember, we had all these slides, but we constantly were rearranging them to get them in. No, that flows better. No, that flows. That's that piece. So you need a lot of help doing it. And the more educated people, the better, in kind of some that don't know anything and some that know a lot. Then you have to take it on the road. And there's usually a lead. And that lead is, my experience has been, they usually do 60-70% of the talking. And then you have the others, the 2 others max, that chime in. So I can't, it distracts people when you switch speakers sometimes. It just gets them like, oh, now I've got to figure out what that person looks like and talks like. And so my personal experience is you should have the CEO or chief storyteller, sometimes the CFO, sometimes, well, no, not as much the marketing folk, but somebody has to take a lead, right, and do the vast majority of the pitch. Is that what you're asking? Kind of like, how do you get a lot of people to get it tight?
Right.
Practice in front of people, tape it, practice. Then somebody's going to have to do the vast majority of the talking.
Well, here's my last tough question for me, which is, how many times do you tell the same story until you know the story doesn't work? Like, my daughter just, was working for the startup and moved her down, and I told the story. We moved her into New York, new apartment Wednesday, Thursday, startup goes belly up. So
right.
She managed to get a job with a VC firm, and what she hears is, well, the CEO told a story 70, 80 times to other investors, and nobody invested, and we just couldn't do it. So their number was 80. Is there a magic number where you say, I've talked to this many people and it's not going to work?
Right. That's a really good question. It's a lot, though. I mean, it's a lot. I can only just say it's a lot. I mean, you have. I mean, here, here's one of the problems that you have with the industry is that particularly investors like to hear stories, even if they know they're not going to invest. The last thing their management wants, the last thing they want to have happen is their competitive firm finds this investment and they didn't even look at it, and then then their management goes, "What? You didn't even look at this? You didn't?" So things may have changed a little bit, but my impression was they potential investors will always take a meeting. They always want to know, maybe they don't want to miss the FOMO issue, or they learn something. They learn something that's going to be useful the next time. So a lot of people are going to be taking meetings. Your investment bankers can call that down to people who have traditionally invested. That helps. But to answer your question more directly, I'd say 80 is not a bad number. I spent half my life in Midtown Manhattan pitching stuff. I know every building there is in Midtown because I've been in pitching various, companies. It takes a lot. It takes a lot. And then there's a whole nother, we could have a whole nother series about how companies end
Right.
and what happens. It's not all bad. That could be a whole nother segment. Maybe you've had that segment already. I don't
No.
know. But a lot of firms are not going to make it that you probably talked to, unfortunately. And that doesn't mean, but there is a whole segment there. And we could talk about how after that 80, what happens.
Have you noticed any commonalities amongst either the best stories or the best storytellers?
The best storytellers are, I would start with the storytellers. Mostly it's a human thing.
Mhm.
Mostly it's a connection thing. It's does the listener find a personal way to connect so that they're listening and they're not being overly sold. It's a credible allowing. Now that's as fuzzy as it gets, and I don't know how to define that, Laura. I really don't. But people. I know people who you can connect with pretty easily,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, absolutely.
I know people who've actually you've known a long time, but there's a little part of them you don't connect. You can't get all the truth. You can't get that. You have to find people who are telling the story, that have a personality and a connective a way to resonate with people. Humility helps. Humor helps. Being incredibly prepared helps. Saying "I don't know" when you don't know helps. Things like that. If that At that point I think you've got 8/10 of it done. Then you're the rest of the story likely will be heard and appreciated if you can, even the tempo, helps. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was great. Lee, thank you for your time.
Well, anytime. I love this stuff. Come on. You
Hey,
know that.
we'll
Gonna have
have
you
you
back.
back. We'll have you back, Laura. He already said he'll come back, so we'll.
Yeah, no, I like that topic
I
too.
let me just say, you guys do a great service to the biz, and I need to catch up on all your latest, uh, shows. I have to admit I'm a little behind, but
All right.
thank you for having me.
All right. Hey, thanks. Hey, thanks for joining us. We appreciate listening to our audience. Send us feedback, and we'll do more of these. Lee, Laura, thanks.
Thanks.
Super. Thank you all.